Hello everybody, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about a newly painted unit. These guys are the Continental Army Ranger unit known as Whitcomb's Rangers. So I'll give you a little history on them. After the failed invasion of Canada, 1775-76, the Continental Army fell back into New York at Fort Ticonderoga, which was known as the key to the continent at the time because of its important location along the lakes and Hudson River. So it was very, very, very important for the Continental Army to obtain intelligence on what the British Army was doing in regard to the frontier area and their operations coming out of Canada. In our previous video, we talked about one of the British Ranger units, which operated out of Canada. So these guys here, Whitcombs, would have been the type of element that would act as a screen to prevent those British Rangers from doing their job and to prevent their native allies from doing any damage to the settlements on the New England frontier. So Lieutenant Benjamin Whitcomb was born in Lancaster, Massachusetts in 1737. And he served as a Massachusetts provincial in the French and Indian War along the very same terrain along Lake Champlain where he would operate during the American Revolution. He was identified during operations around Montreal as an active young officer, and his experience in the previous war was valuable as a light infantryman and scout. So he recruited men primarily from the New Hampshire grants and Vermont to serve in his Ranger unit, and they became known as Whitcomb's Rangers. These guys operated throughout the war on the northern border with Canada, and their primary job, as I stated, was reconnaissance or as a screening force. They fought alongside Dearborn's light infantry at the Battle of Freeman's Farm in 1777. They also served at Hubbardton, Fort Anne, and Bennington during the 1777 campaigns. And then for the remainder of the war, they worked out of Rutland, Vermont, and New Hampshire. They established a fort at Rutland known as Fort Ranger. And in 1779, they stopped a British attempt to burn a mill at Bridgeport, Vermont. In 1780, the British actually sent a raiding force of 300 men to capture Whitcomb, and they failed in that endeavor. But they did kill and capture other inhabitants of that region and bring them back to Canada. So throughout the war, it was a bit of a guerrilla war along that frontier. And we lose focus of it because, of course, the major battles shifted south by that time, and they would attract a lot more attention. So this unit represents that force that protected that northern frontier and did such good service throughout the war. Whitcomb survived the war. He lived to the ripe old age of 92. He died in 1828 in Lisbon, New Hampshire. Had 6 kids with his wife, Lydia. So one of those successful Continental Army officers. His unit here and how I've painted them, I avoided fringed hunting frocks primarily for the reason that the North Woods is a rough, cold, wet country. And I personally feel that wool is a better material, and they would have known that. And while they didn't have an issued uniform, Whitcomb's Rangers are documented as having received brown faced red French lottery coats. So I have mixed a couple of those in there along with some militia figures. I'm just trying to give you a little view of some of the equipment and clothing that they are wearing. There's your back view. So I worked as a guide. It wasn't my only job. It was a sideline gig. But I worked as a guide in northwestern Maine along the Quebec border, guiding hunters and fishermen for a few years. And I will tell you, wool is a magical material in the North Woods. Linen hunting frocks were certainly adopted by the Continental Army and by New England troops by the later phases of the war, but they were not as practical clothing as wool. And these guys worked in a really harsh environment in that North Woods. It's swampy, it's cold, it's wet, and wool would be a life-saving material for them. So that's what I've focused on, is wool coats. Some uniform coats, as documented with the brown-faced red, and a mixture of hats. I did a few little hat conversions, very basic conversions. So this fellow right here in the blue Scottish hat, I envisioned he was a veteran of Rogers Rangers, which was heavily documented to have preferred that style of hat. I could see why. As wool, it was small, it wouldn't catch on things, easy for moving through the woods. So I dressed, that was a militia figure. I removed his tricorn. I added a Warlord Games tam that I'd shaved the pom-pom off and kind of cut down and made it look more like a Scottish hat that's appropriate for the period. So gave him a green civilian frock. Figure he probably wanted to fall back on his experience as a Rogers Rangers when he joined up. Here's another militia figure that I mixed in. The remainder are British Army Ranger figures from Perry, but I did change the hats, as you see here. The small round hat was a very popular piece of headgear for Rangers. It was ideal for moving through the woods. So these two have round hats. The fella in the blue here, I didn't paint that as a uniform coat. I painted it as a sailor's style of jacket, because this being New England, and some of them being New Hampshire men. New Hampshire is a seacoast state where they had merchant sailors and privateers working out of their harbors, and I could see some maritime clothing as being part of the clothing they would adopt. So there you have them. I've added a few little blanket rolls and that sort of thing. But all in all, the equipment's pretty good on these guys. And I did use the British Ranger figures, so they were pretty ideal to begin with. And then those militia guys look pretty good mixed in. So I hope you like these. And there you have it. Whitcomb's Rangers of the Continental Army, operating in the deep, dark, inhospitable North Woods throughout the war. Pretty fascinating unit. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.